The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
A very warm welcome to Scorebox Europe. I'm Steve Sedgwick with Karen Cho and Ben Boulos, and these are your headlines. Anthropic now joining the AI IPO race, filing confidentially after a funding round last week valued the company at close to $1 trillion. Arch rival OpenAI's Sam Altman plays down the importance of going public to CNBC.
I think there is a race to deliver the best technology and build the best business, but going public is a financing event, and I don't think that's one that we're focused on the timing of. We'll do it when we think it makes sense.
But you will do it as well.
I assume we'll do it someday.
Yeah.
Softbank CEO Masayoshi Son is perhaps unsurprisingly bullish on AI in his exclusive conversation with CNBC, calling the technology the biggest revolution mankind has ever witnessed.
This is like more than 10x, probably 50x bigger than .com. This is a beginning, and the future of the profit and growth opportunities tremendous.
President Trump tells CNBC he doesn't care if peace talks with Iran are over, calling the negotiations boring, adding that Israeli troops are turning back from Beirut after a call with Netanyahu.
And Berkshire Hathaway's post-Buffett era kicks off into full gear, with Greg Abel, the CEO, now piling another $10 billion into Alphabet, with the tech giant raising $80 billion to fund its AI build-out. As you see off the headlines, it is a blockbuster day, and there's a load of stuff we even couldn't fit in the headlines. So we'll get through all of these big stories sequentially throughout the show. I promise you we'll do them justice. Anthropic has confidentially filed for an IPO with the SEC, setting the stage for a major AI debut on Wall Street. It comes hot on the heels of the company's Series H funding round, where it raised $65 billion, a valuation of $965 billion. Anthropic's filing is the latest in what is expected to be a summer of major IPOs stateside, after SpaceX filed in April, and with investors also expecting debuts from OpenAI and potentially Databricks. Just a quick word before I go on. If they're just raising so much money in the private sector and there's money abundant there, why are they going with the public money as well? Just chucking that one in. I'm going to ask a few people that one over the next few days. Right, including Arjun, who's nodding here. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman heard about Anthropic's confidential listing just before he sat down with CNBC's David Faber, and said he doesn't think there's a race to be the first AI company to hit the public markets.
I think there is a race to deliver the best technology and build the best business, but going public is a financing event, and I don't think that's one that we're focused on the timing of. We'll do it when we think it makes sense.
But you will do it as well.
I assume we'll do it someday. Yeah.
Softbank CEO Masayoshi Son says the AI revolution is 50 times bigger than the dot-com boom in the 2000s. He told CNBC that while AI may face some setbacks, any potential correction would be a prime investment opportunity. Arjun joins us with more. Arjun, an exciting interview yesterday. Some of the conversations you had with Masayoshi Son, a little bit sound like the man on the moon conversation, the big advances for mankind, the sort of revolution we're getting. We're not just talking about man putting foot on the moon, we're talking about man colonizing another planet at some point, data centers in space, and the biggest leap forward for mankind that we've seen in many, many years thanks to technology.
Yeah, look, and Masayoshi Son is taking a very long-term view. He talks about this being a 50 to 100-year sort of revolution around AI, and you can understand why he's bullish. Right now, SoftBank is basically all in on AI, right? It's OpenAI at the heart of that, the crown jewel in SoftBank's investment strategy. You've got the chip designers, ARM, for example, Ampere as well, now building data centers. And so SoftBank is saying, hey, we're going to play across this entire AI technology stack, and that's been the strategy so far. And Masayoshi Son is 100% convinced this is it, but he's also well aware that what we've seen in the past is corrections happen in these big technology run-ups, and so that's something he's well aware of. But he thinks that over the long term, this is going to be a big deal. As we spoke about where we're headed towards and where we are in this cycle around AI, I asked Masayoshi Son why he's convinced that this is going to be a long bull run. Let's listen in.
This is just the beginning of next 50 years journey. Probably more than 50 years, could be 100 years. This is the biggest revolution of technology and civilization that mankind ever experienced. So this is just like a beginning of internet. Now this is still a beginning of AI. And I think the future is so big. This is just the beginning.
And like the beginning of the internet, we did see at the time the dot-com bubble. Is there any comparisons you can see at this point between what happened then and now?
I think this is like more than 10x, probably 50x bigger than dot-com. So even dot-com, there was a bubble and burst, but then right after that, the peak of the dot-com bubble, the year 2000 was not really a peak. It was like a small hill. And then went down, but then it went much, much bigger with a big, profitable, free cash flow. So AI will be, this is a beginning, and the future of the profit and growth opportunity is tremendous.
And so you're not concerned about a correction at this point?
There is always a correction, okay? Even year 2029, there was a crash in the Wall Street. That was basically because of electronics and motorization. Now, if you look at the history, electronic and motorization, 1929, it crashed, but went up and up many, many years for next 100 years after that. So that kind of thing is going to happen. There may be some correction, but that would be a best investment opportunity time to me, if there is any correction.
So Masayoshi Son saying any kind of correction we may see in this run for him would be a buying opportunity. Look, we know he's made some absolutely bold bets over the years. It was the Alibaba investment that made him famous. It was the WeWork bet that was not so good, and he admitted there. We've learnt mistakes from that as well. And now he's all in on OpenAI. And we know, and we've discussed, there are so many questions around this OpenAI story, that this is a company that may come to market at $1 trillion plus valuation. It's still unprofitable. There's intense competition. And so, when Anthropic does come to market, that's going to be a big test. When these big IPOs come to market, big test for investor appetite around these mega companies.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but in the recent numbers for the last couple of quarters, we saw an element where there wasn't that single stock buying as much, that whale type of effect, where Softbank changed its stripes at one point and went in and bought a lot of single-name tech exposures. I wonder whether that was a glimpse into what could happen in future if there were to be a pullback, whether we'd see the whale type of behaviour re-emerge for Softbank.
Yeah, I mean, it was last year, I think they opened a sort of position in NVIDIA and eventually sold that off at a profit. And I think what we've seen from Softbank, I think, over the past couple of years is there is this singular idea from Masayoshi Son that SoftBank needs to be playing at all levels of this AI story. And it started with sort of chips and ARM, OpenAI being the latest. And there's these other ideas now around robotics and automation and autonomous driving. And when I asked Masayoshi Son where he thinks that next $1 trillion company coming from, he was very quick to say physical AI, robotics. That's the next sort of derivative of this AI play for him. And so what you're seeing is SoftBank try to balance, and we've seen this selling down assets or raising money via that way to then funnel it into where Masayoshi Son and the broader SoftBank group thinks the next big opportunity is going to be. And I asked him earlier, how are you going to fund some of this data center investment in France? And he was like, we can project finance it when we get customers on board. We've had early inquiries about that. And he goes, we don't think we're going to have to sell anything down. So you're going to continue to see, I think, SoftBank use all of these available financing tools, whether it's debt, which we've seen, Softbank rely heavily on, whether it's selling down existing assets, T-Mobile, for example, some of those Alibaba forward contracts, and whether it's also IPOing of some of the companies that are in the pipeline, ByteDance being one of them, the TikTok owner. These are some of the tools you're going to see available to SoftBank as it continues, I think, to be convinced by this AI story, and that money then will be used to go into perhaps more OpenAI, perhaps data center, and perhaps some of these other big robotic physical AI bets that Masayoshi Son is convinced of.
There's two things going on here. There's many things going on, but one, being convinced of the AI story, and I'm pretty convinced by the AI story. I think it's terrifying, and actually I feel quite negative about it because I am convinced about it. I think it is going to happen, and it's going to happen and destroy a lot of things that we rely on in the 21st century already. But the other thing going on is that there is an assumption that it is going to be led, in terms of the stock market performance, by OpenAI, Anthropic, Nvidia, SpaceX, American-led companies. And I think that's just too big an assumption at the moment, given what China has done and other countries have done at every stage of their own technological revolutions. And if that is the case, unless there's going to be some great canyon or a wall being built down the middle of the Pacific, I don't see how the US can necessarily at this stage claim it's going to own the ecosystem, the infrastructure, the rules and regulations regarding global AI, because the revolution we're seeing in the States isn't just about US investment, it's about owning the global infrastructure. If China does do this, and you mentioned robotics, look what the Chinese are doing on robotics at the moment. It is wiping the floor with Optimus at the moment. And Optimus may come back, 3.0 or whatever, it'll be amazing. But at the moment, it's wiping the floor. How do we bet on these valuations that are happening in American-led tech stocks when China, you spent years there, you've seen what they can do, Arjun.
Yeah. They can move incredibly quickly. Look, I think one of the things that's happened over the past few years is this bifurcating geopolitical world that has spilled into technology, right? Where some areas of the world are building on US technology and US technology infrastructure, and other parts of the world are trying to use and are open to Chinese infrastructure. I do see that playing out in the AI space as well, where you will continue to have US infrastructure in certain parts of the world, but there will be certain parts of the world that are open to and will use Chinese infrastructure around AI, and that could extend into semiconductors, into data centers, and the broader Chinese technology stack. I think the bifurcation we've seen in this kind of current era around the internet, it will continue into AI. And so whilst the US may not...
It is, isn't it? I mean, it's already slowing them down in terms of data centers. Where are those Chinese data center announcements? They're not happening because of the regulatory hurdles, right?
They're not happening, but I think that where China has been typically strong is in places like Africa, like Latin America, and some of these other emerging markets in Southeast Asia. And those are continents and areas which are behind in terms of investment because they don't have the capital that the US does. And so whilst we're not seeing those data centers big announcements right now, I think down the road you will. And we saw it with telecoms, with Huawei and what it did in some of those emerging markets. And I expect a very similar thing to play out with AI infrastructure globally. So I don't think it is a one-horse race with the US winning, but I think you're going to see this bifurcation in AI continue when it comes to who's building on what technology stack.
For more on Masayoshi Son's claims, by the way, great, they rang you up, didn't they? I love this.
They rang me up on a Friday night.
They rang up, yeah. Oh, can you speak to Masa? It was a bit like that, wasn't it?
It was very much like that. We sort of mobilised, obviously, incredible team here at CNBC. Mobilised on Saturday.
Oh, come on.
I was in the middle of a cricket match.
Don't worry about the team. Don't worry about the team.
I was in the middle of a cricket match calling George, our wonderful producer.
Well, he's a producer. You got that right.
Yeah. Lucky I got out for 5. So I had enough time to speak to him.
Was George playing as well?
George wasn't playing, though. George was doing important work.
Well done, George. He's brilliant, I agree. And well done, Arjun. That's great. What power. Yeah, Masa wants a word, Arj. OK, I'll get there. For more on Masayoshi Son's claims that AI boom is 50 times bigger than dot-com revolution, check out CNBC.com. And to find out where he sees the next $1 trillion opportunity, head to CNBC Pro. Ben, the markets.
Yeah, let's have a look at the markets. And I'm going to use a phrase that I feel like I use more often than usual at the moment, and it's fresh intraday highs, fresh closing highs, because That was to be found across all three of the US benchmarks at the end of the Monday session. Look at that, the S&P flirting with the 7,600 level. Who knows, it may cross that threshold when trading gets underway for the Tuesday. But very much the tech story powering the Wall Street markets to those fresh record highs on Monday, starting the new trading month off very much on the front foot. And actually, when you step back and have a look at how they've performed since the Iran war began even, the S&P 500 has gained 10% in that time, and the Nasdaq is up almost 20% since the Iran war began, underscoring just how important that tech play is that we've heard so much about, and those developments in that space that Arjun was just talking us through as well a moment ago. And this, I should say, despite the fact oil prices jumped in the Monday session. At the same time, US crude was up around 5%. The international benchmark Brent was up 4% at $94 a barrel for Brent for the contract. So the market's shrugging that off, clearly energized by those movements and the news around the AI space. Let's see how things are playing out in the Asian session for Tuesday. And a bit of a more mixed picture there. The Nikkei giving up almost 0.5% despite all that news flow around Softbank and the moves it's making. And then the Kospi as well, which we have seen powering to recent new all-time highs and closing highs, retreating in the current session as well. The Hang Seng and the Shanghai Composite, though, advancing and bucking the trend that the other two have set. Let's see what's being anticipated when European trading gets underway, and a more positive picture being pointed to by the futures. This, after the first day of the new trading month, was a pretty negative one for European equities. The Pan-European Stock 600 had closed the day lower. All of the main bourses and sectors were down, although, surprise, surprise, the European tech basket of stocks had bucked that trend, closing yesterday 1.4% higher. Let's see if these gains play out when trading gets underway in about 45 minutes from now. In terms of futures, let's also have a quick glance at what's being anticipated on Wall Street, and looking to give up some of the gains despite a lot of energizing news flow around Anthropic, for example, and its plans to list. It's confidentially filed its IPO prospectus, and we've also heard that SpaceX is now expected to file next week as well. So despite all of that news flow, clearly some negative sentiment around, perhaps reflecting some of the comments President Trump made about negotiations with Iran now seeming boring to him, and he doesn't care if they walk away from the negotiating table. Let's see how things play out. Still a few hours away before Wall Street gets started for Tuesday trading. Steve.
I could not believe those Trump comments, Ben. I just could not believe it. Negotiations that aren't wrapped up in 24 hours, 40 hours, whatever, are boring, and he couldn't care less. I mean, even if you don't mean it, I mean, seriously? Let's move on. Richard Kay is portfolio manager at Comgest Growth Japan and joins us now. Richard, great to see you. Thanks for joining us from Tokyo as well. Look, we're focusing a little bit on Softbank after Arjun secured that interview with Masayoshi Son as well. He doesn't see a bubble. Of course he doesn't see a bubble. That's why he's investing so heartily at these levels. But do you have concerns about the valuations that Softbank and other investors are being asked to pay for growth at the moment, sir? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me on, and great call on the Masa interview. No is the direct answer to your question. I think that people are worrying too much about the valuation on SoftBank specifically and on the AI story generally. I think if you look at the proposed market capitalization, the projected revenues of these major companies versus the installed base of users in the world, and work that back to a lifetime value calculation of the value per user, actually, the numbers are not exaggerated. Think how much gross profit Apple makes off selling us equipment which we renew every 3 years or something, and aggregate that over a lifetime of a user. Well, the figures that these companies are implied to make are not that different, actually. You could even say that these numbers are understated. These trillion-dollar market caps are even understated. And therefore, for SoftBank specifically, with its stake in OpenAI, and SoftBank more generally with all the other businesses it has, I do not think that there's a valuation problem. In fact, I come from the very contrary angle, having watched SoftBank and Japan generally for decades. I think that people are only just warming up to this story, and they're only just beginning to realize how exciting it is, and the valuation does not yet reflect the full potential.
That's great. Unequivocal view there, Richard. Look, I'll just push back gently, if I may. Are we looking at the wrong valuation metrics there? You mentioned revenue. I like to talk in profit terms for these very developed companies. Well, not a lot of them are as young as OpenAI. But when I'm being asked to pay 50 times forward or 25 times sales or what have you, these are traditional valuation metrics. Am I and those who are perhaps more circumspect about valuations looking at the wrong measures?
I think that profits will follow inevitably if revenues are there. These are scalable, high incremental margin businesses, and concrete, deliverable, replicable revenues are a clear indicator of profits to come. We've had this discussion before. Was it not said about Alibaba, to talk about another SoftBank major investment? Was it not said about Uber? Most of the e-commerce stories, and of course the dot-com story when it launched, when it went wrong, was all characterized by the same debate. A lot of these companies ended up succeeding. Amazon today is vastly profitable, but they went through many years of losing money, but the revenue told you that they were approaching break even and then great profitability. I think we need to have that leap of faith. And I think that share prices or even private equity valuations are starting to make that leap of faith. I think part of Mr. Son's genius is that he's made that leap of faith in many investments. Sometimes he's got it wrong, but mostly he's got it right. And yes, I think that the valuations are perfectly acceptable and if anything, still understated.
Richard, part of the conversation with Masayoshi Son was what could go wrong too and what could cause a market sell-off. And no doubt you've been road testing the portfolio too. Just a couple of thoughts here. One, about the capex, a huge capex requirement still in the replenishment cycle that is required with AI, requires funding markets to stay open. So that seems to be one of the risks. The other around the amount of project finance. And again, we heard it from Masayoshi Son that project finance is going to be used when it comes to some of these projects, when it comes to France. That effectively means that they're relying on a cash flow, a future cash flow that we don't know what that looks like because we're still in the early innings when it comes to AI. So just talk us through those risks and whether you think those are the major ones.
Yeah, thank you very much. On the capital expenditure, first of all, I think that it's perfectly possible that the capital expenditure being mooted, it will not be delivered because the equipment and software evolution we get in the next 10 years will not require it. I'm saying that inference will become simpler. You'll need fewer chips. I'm saying that DRAM and NAND memory requirements will become less than people think, again, because of software evolution. That's great news if you're someone like SoftBank who's throwing up data, who's helping data centers be built and doesn't need such a large capital expenditure budget. It's not great news if you're the people supplying that stuff, but SoftBank isn't, with the exception perhaps of its ARM business. But ARM is, as you know, an architecture business, is slightly different. Again, I say the innovations in equipment and software may actually get the capex bill down, and these figures look much less aggressive. And to the previous question, that the profit turnaround day becomes much more favorable than we think. On the second point about cash flow and how project finance could work for these, I agree there's a leap of faith involved, just like talking about revenues leading to future profits. There's a leap of faith involved. But I go back to how SoftBank has financed itself throughout its existence. It's built a very large collateral of equity holdings, and those are fungible listed equity that it can make cash with. It's done this in the past. It's sold stakes to buy other stakes. It talks, as you know, and I think Mr. Son would have said this to you, about a 25% loan to value ratio that it uses. Its own debt versus its fungible, readily available equity. Those parameters have allowed it to borrow from regular banks quite liberally. And banks here in Japan, Mizuho Bank especially, have a good relationship and a proven track record and success with that lending. Yes, even if cash flows aren't readily available, SoftBank has been able to finance. And again, I think that the France project that you referred to and other projects will be more feasible than people think.
So Richard, just quickly, let me ask you about some of the names in the portfolio, because Masayoshi Son was also talking about robotics, physical AI. It feels like you've got some of those in the Japanese portfolio that you've listed.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, we have a lot of them, and robotics has been part of Japan's strength for decades. Again, as I was saying earlier, I think Japan for a long time hasn't perhaps been understood properly as a market potential, and specifically companies like this that are dominating the robotics and technology space have not been understood. Softbank is kind of a microcosm of that conversation, but other players like Fanuc or Keyence, which are among the world's largest robot and sensor makers, are only just now, I think, being appreciated by global investors. Specifically, the opportunity with AI, robotics, of course, physical AI, as Mr. Son calls it, but more generally, the application of robots in changing societies. Again, Japan being an aging demographic has used robots more widely than other developed economies, hence its strength. I think these are opportunities not well perceived. Now, SoftBank, as you know, has bought the ABB robot business a few months ago. I think there are some very exciting stories coming out of that. SoftBank has a number of other robotics investments. And I think that those experiences, along with Japan's pre-existing strength in robotics, augur a very interesting future for Japanese companies in this area.
Okay. Richard, we're a bit short on time, but thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get you back on another occasion.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, Richard Kerr, that's Portfolio Manager, Comgest Growth Japan. Thank you very much.
Coming up on the show, crude prices whipsaw amid mixed messaging over the status of negotiations between the US and Iran. Dan will bring us the latest from Abu Dhabi. Plus, BP backs Amanda Blanc to lead the search for a new chair, despite opposition from investors and city figures. And later this hour, we'll be speaking to the co-founder of Arm, that's Herman Hauser. Conversation coming up at 7:45 London time.
I'm Steve Sedgwick from CNBC, and in my new podcast, Executive Decisions, I ask powerful leaders about their decisions that changed everything.
I'm not frightened of making tough decisions, and I think leadership can be very lonely.
Business leaders should not stay quiet in a world which is super complex.
It is absolutely fine to also change your mind.
Tough calls, personal crossroads. These are the stories that we can all learn from. It's Executive Decisions from CNBC. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
US President Donald Trump offered conflicting messaging around the status of negotiations with Iran on Monday, telling CNBC he didn't care if they were over, before saying in a Truth Social post that talks are continuing at a rapid pace. Trump also said in a post on Truth Social that Israel and Hezbollah had agreed to end attacks, whilst Lebanon's embassy in Washington announced a partial ceasefire. A look at how futures are faring this morning. Don't forget, yesterday, some disappointment in the trade around the progress with these negotiations. So we were on the back foot across Europe, down 0.75%, looking like we'll flip positive this morning and recapture some of that territory.